My name's Sophie, and my fun fact about St. Louis is that for a long time you could not build a building taller than the St. Louis Arch.
Hi, my name's Claire. My fun fact actually ties into Sophie's, and it's that St. Louis had the first skyscraper in the United States. It wasn't very tall, but we had the first one.
And I'm Katie, and my fun fact about St. Louis is the reason our water is so great is because Anheuser-Busch wanted better water, and so the city's like, if you want better water, then pay for it, and they did. So that's why our water is so great.
Okay, so we're driving on Highway 44 right now, and at some point on this highway, relatively close to where we are, it says, leaving St. Louis City, entering St. Louis County. And that's because St. Louis is one of only a couple other places in the United States, the most notable being Baltimore, whose city is actually divorced from the county, and that they are two separate entities, which is going to be the topic of today's video. We're going to be all St. Louis all the time, per usual for this car, but we're going to talk about city-county consolidation. So our county has over 80 municipalities, which is a lot. And so what are our general thoughts on consolidation, on how this divide helps us, how this divide hurts us, and then we'll go from there.
So I think it makes sense to tell the history of St. Louis City and St. Louis County. So actually, I don't remember the exact date, but it was in the 1800s. The city people voted to secede from the county. So the city left the county originally, and since then, I think there's been like around 10 or so attempts, including Better Together is the most recent attempt, to reunite the city and the county. But a lot of times people think the county were the people who left the city, when in reality the city split from the county originally, but now you get a lot of people flying to the county out of the city, so it makes people think that, but that's a common misconception.
Oh, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
There was an article in the Post-Dispatch, which is our local newspaper, that talks about how all of this, so it's called the Great Divorce, and all of it was completely done by leaders. People didn't really know what was going on, but leaders wanted more power, and so the way we are now, your local mayors have a lot of power and your city has a lot of power, versus if we consolidated, everyone would probably lose a significant amount of that.
And one thing I would like to bring up is what you kind of touched on for a second with Better Together. So Better Together was the most recent, attempt to merge the city and the county. And I would like to talk about why Better Together flopped so hard. And from my study of the merger and talking to the mayor of Chesterfield and other people who know about the merger, it seemed that there was a lot of misinformation about what that merger actually was doing. What was it? They didn't want to actually merge the school districts or whatever. And that's a big thing that people, at least where I'm from, is totally against. So we were like, yeah, no, absolutely not, because of the school districts. But they actually didn't do that. So I think if we do want to have a merger, there needs to be better communication. There needs to be more information. And the public cannot be misled like it was during Better Together.
Let's take a quick vote to let people know where our biases are. Who in this car is in favor of a consolidation plan? And you can outline what that consolidation plan looks like if you're in favor, but if you're totally not in favor of any consolidation, say so now so that we all know where everybody stands.
I'm going to be honest, I might be the outlier in this car. I'm not positive on my stance of the idea of a merger just yet. I really like the idea of cooperation. I really like the idea of some sort of consolidation, but I think for it to happen, there has to be more, I don't know how to explain it, but there has to be an actual connecting of the city and the county in a way that's beneficial to everyone, because right now no one seems to actually want it yet. You know what I mean? Or some people do, but it's too hot topic right now with how bad Better Together and Stenger. So I think we need a little bit before going right back into it.
So I'm generally in favor of consolidation. I do not think Better Together was the right way to do it. I think that especially because where I live is technically unincorporated St. Louis County, and because we have so much land that is technically considered unincorporated St. Louis County all throughout the metropolitan area, that is a huge problem that consolidating would fix.
That's true.
Yeah, but I also think that we need to fix the individual St. Louis County government and the individual St. Louis City government first before we try and put them together and just make it even more of a chaotic mess, because St. Louis County Executive, at least, and Steve Sanger and all that jumbled mess, and then you have the Board of Aldermen who is deciding whether to redraw the lines or to cut the Board of Aldermen in half, and you have like the city treasurer and all these positions that kind of like overlap with like the comptroller and other things. Director of Revenue is another thing. They're all dealing with money, but there's 3 separate positions for it. Why should the city treasurer be in charge of parking downtown? I don't know. That's just the way St. Louis is. So I think definitely we would need to work on reorganizing our city governments and fixing all of the corruption issues within the county government before even trying to mash the two together.
I completely agree. I think that's where I'm stuck, is that we need to fix the county, and the city kind of needs to help fix the city before they can really, like, politically. And I think that's something we should tackle. Like, I'm not saying, like, oh, eventually once we get this done, we'll go to the merger. But I'm saying, like, right now, a priority should be fixing the things that are broken before trying to fix them together, if that makes sense. Because it's like in a marriage, you can't be like, there's this thing of like 2 halves don't really make a whole, it's 2 wholes make a whole. And I think we could, and like, yes, the city and the county should help each other through that process, but I think we need to really fix our issues first.
I'm a bit of a radical on this. I think we've had 100 years to fix the city county, and we haven't. And I think the only way to actually get this merger done is somebody needs to start. And it's not going to happen. We don't have leaders who are willing to give up power, and we don't have good people on the ground talking to both communities in the city and communities in the county to figure out what they need. My ideal merger would happen in phases. We would have a unified tax bracket at this point. So right now there's different sales tax in different areas in the county, there's different sales tax in the city. I would unify that. I would unify our taxes. Then I would merge police and fire just for safety reasons. Then I would merge education, maybe, although we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I would merge our actual government, make them feel like they're important and they get to hold on to their power a little longer. That's my ideal merger. But I think we need to talk about all those things individually, because I think a lot of people are in favor of merging a couple aspects, but not all. So let's start with taxes. Do we think we need a common tax base?
Sales tax should be, I don't know if that should be universal or like it's the same, but I think it should be more proportionally accurate, if that makes sense. Because like in Chesterfield, where there's a ton of like different sales, like, you know, the valley, versus other places like, you know, Winchester, for example, that may not have as much sales revenue, those can't be like the same and have it be a fair collection of taxes unless they are merged together and that tax base is common, if that makes sense. So if everything is one, yes, but if it's different municipalities still, we can't have it be the same.
Yeah, I agree with what Katie was saying. I think the way you described it is pretty good. I think that there shouldn't be any reason why we don't have a common sales tax for people, just based on the difference between the city and the county, which certain parts of the city look like the county and certain parts of the county can look like the city and have similar neighborhoods and have similar demographics of people living there. I would definitely be in agreement with having a common sales tax.
Yeah, I think having a common tax base makes the whole area look more desirable. So right now, the difficulty is that there's a lot of infighting between the city and the county about where businesses are going to go. It's a well-known fact in St. Louis that we have just about 3 whole downtowns, which doesn't make any sense, and it keeps the tax bracket spread out, it keeps businesses going to one or the other, and it really makes the whole region in competition instead of working together, which is why our population is rapidly declining, and some of that is white flight, because St. Louis is massively segregated and has massive racial issues, and some of it is just the fact that when you have to compete with only one area, so the region of St. Louis is speaking with one voice and saying we're going to give you this amount of tax breaks to a company, then they have to take it. Whereas if you have a county that's saying, hey, I can afford to give you more than the city, I'm going to give you this. And then the city's going, well, we're trying to be competitive and we're not able to be competitive. And that's the problem right now. We don't have a common tax base, so the whole region is competing against each other instead of with each other.
That's very true. I think that's the big thing about the consolidation plan that I actually really, really like, is that we will stop be competing with each other, and that would make businesses want to come to this like city so much more if they didn't have to like measle around the whole county, city, different municipalities, all these different things. If we had one like consolidated St. Louis, then businesses would be much more drawn. We'd get better jobs, and that would be so amazing for this city. That is one thing about the merger that I'm 100% on board with.
Yeah, I think that definitely if we were to revive the city, we'd have more people from the county willing to go into the city and not just for baseball and hockey. Even though that's great that those are two things that do bring people from the county into the city. But when it comes to city-county traveling back and forth, another problem is the lack of public transportation. And so I think expanding the Metrolink out to further places in the county that go through the city is definitely an essential part of any consolidation plan.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of St. Louis that, like, and I say 9 times out of 10, I think in this car when we say St. Louis, we mean both the city and the county.
Yeah.
We'll try and be better about clarifying that. But all of us don't see a huge divide, so that kind of plays into it.
Yeah, I see divides between like different parts of the county, and obviously with like the Del Mar divide, like there is a lot of segregation and there's a lot of differences between different parts of St. Louis. But all in all, culturally, like St. Louis culture is both the city and the county. Like at the end of the day, it really is.
I think one of my arguments for a merger and for merging now is that county people use the city all the time. So the city's getting the raw end of the stick because they have people coming in and working, but they don't have people living there.
Yeah.
And so they're using the resources, they're taking advantage of it, and they're not actually paying the property taxes, they're not actually paying any of the taxes for the city, but they're using all the resources. A big argument, so we almost got a soccer stadium. We're going to go into sports real quick. We tried for it, and a big argument against funding the soccer stadium was that it was just going to be the city, but everyone in the city was like, we're not going to be the ones using the soccer stadium. It's going to be a lot of county folks coming in with their kids, with their families. And so that was a big thing, was that the city feels like the county uses their resources and doesn't pay their fair share, which is true.
That's very fair.
The county does not pay the bills that they cause the city, which would be fixed with a merger. But
yeah,
again, I'm totally for a merger. Let's talk about police and fire.
This here is something that I, again, might be a bit of an outlier on because, my mom is an auditor for different police and fire districts throughout St. Louis County and part of St. Louis City as well. And a big, section that she audits is different North County, police and fire, like Bellefontaine Neighbors, I know she does, St. Anne she does. And so, the problem with consolidating and having one police department force and all that stuff is that they ran the tests and it would completely mess up the arrival time of the police officers in emergency vehicles compared to how it is now. So I think an idea would definitely be having all have the same funding, have them all have the same amount of pay for the cops, and if we also went communal cops, which I am a big supporter of having cops be from the community that they are policing, I don't know about merging them into one district. And especially being really, really far out west, the head of it probably will be downtown, and that would be a really far distance for emergency vehicles, if that makes sense. And yeah, they did do the test, and it didn't look good for the county, or the merger, if that makes, county-city merger.
Yeah, that's actually a great point that I've never thought about, and whether we should have these policemen and these firemen, actually coming from these specific communities, because I know a big problem with, public trust in the police is that you're more likely to trust someone who's grown up in the neighborhood, grown up down the street, who's been around, you see their face versus just random officers.
And as a police officer, you're less likely to be aggressive with someone that's your neighbors, if that makes sense.
Or your peeping Tom neighbors that are going to call your mom and be like, he was beating up on this kid today. It's a good point.
Right.
The problem is when you have a neighborhood like Winchester that is 3 streets, how do you get a police force for that works for it? How do you pay these people with the tax base you have? Which is why I agree. I don't think we should have I believe we should consolidate the police force, but in my mind, consolidation doesn't mean that we erase all of the different work that we've done. Chesterfield, right, has one of the best police.
We have, or I guess not we, sorry, I sometimes claim Chesterfield too, but while Chesterfield's police department is considered the most professional police department in the entire county, including the county police department. And they're very proud of that, and they don't want to lose that. And I think that's actually kind of fair, to be honest.
And I think you don't lose the headquarters when you consolidate. You just, for some of these smaller municipalities, which is already happening, you combine with the larger ones around you. So we eliminate some of this ineffective waste. I mean, we have 2 police academies. We have 2 fire academies. What are we doing? Do we really think that the city is training police officers better, or the county is training police officers better when they're doing the same curriculum? It just seems like a waste at that point. Train your officers the same way, in the same place, and then also you erase that divide between county cops being like, well, we're superior because we get higher pay, and beat cops in the city going, I went to the same school as you. Well, essentially, I had the same curriculum. Why am I getting paid less? Which is a big problem. So we standardize the training. I think we consolidate a couple small municipalities. Like Baldwin is doing Winchester's policing right now. So we've already seen some consolidation. We've seen consolidation work.
Well, I don't see that as consolidation. I see that as more as cooperation, which is another like CO word that I think is very important when having this conversation. Is like, should things be like legally, politically consolidated, or should these different municipalities just simply cooperate with each other? And so yeah, I think that's more cooperation than it is consolidation. But I think how it's running right now doesn't seem to be the worst as it is. It just should be more fair for police officers and the constituents of each municipality as to who is policing and how they are paid.
Anyway, so education. So I'm not really in favor of consolidating education, simply because I think when you combine school districts, first of all, is that a fight that we really have the resources or energy to fight? No, there has to be a way to do this more equitably, and we have to be able to do it better than just simply, if we combine school districts and then test scores come down, like the wrath of God is going to come down on every single school district. And the other thing, I was reading an interview that I did with a school teacher. She was talking about how the superintendent of the city schools actually understands what these students are going through, and what they're going through is, in the county, for the most part, you're not likely to hear gunshots every night. You're not likely to be dealing with crime. You're not likely to be dealing with massive poverty and food deserts. It's just not a reality. But it is a reality for these kids in the city. And so that's the difference between city and county schooling, in that county kids don't have all of these things to worry about before they get to school, and city kids do. And equalizing funding for schools isn't going to change that. You have to do radical changes within the community before you can affect education. And so I think the state needs to step in and figure out a way to equalize schools, because we also have schools in rural communities that are going to school 4 days a week because they don't have the funding.
Wow, really?
Yes. I'm sorry. What?
On consolidating this, I really want to be on board, because I come from the most absolute privileged school in, like, public school in St. Louis County. I go to Lafayette High School, which was just ranked #1 in Missouri for public schools. And so obviously, coming from that place of privilege, I know I should be in support of an idea of losing some of our funding, because we paid like $1 million, or we had a $1 million bond to add a turf or whatever. And I'm like, that is so unnecessary. We have a cookie stand that is run throughout the day. That is so unnecessary. That money can be going to actually helping other schools and other things. And obviously, like, I don't want to lose my amazing ACT help and all the amazing teachers that I have and how well they're paid. But I do think it should be more fair, to be completely honest.
I really have nothing to add. I like the way Sophie put it the best.
I am in favor of consolidating education when we've already equalized the playing field. I think education is a much bigger problem than policing and firefighting. It's a much bigger problem than taxes, and it's a much bigger problem of changing education will bring more people to our community, because we'll stop the brain drain.
Education is where it all starts.
Education is where it all starts, and I think the problem is Missouri education as a whole is failing our students, not just the St. Louis City and County. And consolidating it, while it might help, and it would definitely bring statistics around and better, and I think it would force white students to have to, desegregate our schools. That would be really, really nice if we could get that done. We won't. We have a massive private school thing, and the thing about private schools is white people send their kids to private schools to segregate them. Not all, obviously. Some of it is they're Catholic and they want a Catholic education. Some of it is segregation. I think I'm allowed to say that, as
we went to
a private school,
by the way.
I went to a Catholic school too, but only for elementary school, and I can say the minute I changed to a public school that had more, like, you know, diverse population, it was eye-opening. I changed from this, like, raised Republican Catholic girl to, like, actually getting experience for myself. And if I can say anything, guys, give your children the opportunity to experience different cultures as early as you can, because it really does help their mindset growing up. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or, like, independent, whatever, it actually genuinely does help them, even not from a political point of view. Just, like, being able to interact with people of all ethnicities and all cultures.
All right, let's do real fast. This is just going to be a massive episode, and if you're still with us, thank God. This is a lot of things. There's people much smarter than us trying to figure this out, and we're just trying to do the best we can with a summer's worth of data, which is also a lot to put into one video.
Right.
But let's talk governmental consolidation real fast. We've got 80-something mayors. We have people running the same thing. It's kind of a mess. So what are our thoughts on consolidating governmental positions, and how do we do that?
Well, definitely not the way Better Together was gonna do it, because the way that they had it planned, and that's also a major reason as to why Better Together did not pass, because they were going to take a lot of the county officials and give them the executive positions in this St. Louis metropolitan area, and kind of just ignore city officials. And they also put down that they were going to use county officials without checking with the county officials, and I know that because my aunt is Hazel Irby, and she was a former county representative for District 1, and so I think that a huge problem would be that when you do merge the city and the county, the majority of the white population will increase, and the city is majority black, but then it'll set off the whole balance. And to do that, I think to offset that, we have to come up with some sort of way to make sure that we still get representation for minority groups, because it would definitely be an unfair switch from being the majority to the minority, by like a long shot. So definitely we would need something to offset that imbalance and to make sure that we get the minority representation that we deserve.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I think the problem with city government is that it's fiefdoms that don't talk to each other. So you have all of these people running the city and none of them communicate. That doesn't sound like something we want in our government. And the mayors here talk a little bit to each other. They try and communicate as much as possible, but some of it is because they're so small that they have to, whereas the city is much more your typical politicians. But I think Claire's right. You have to do it. You can't flip the population statistics and then just expect everyone to go away for it. I think the city has to have equal or more representation, because I think when we become St. Louis City, the county's going to have to lose power, and I don't think anybody in the county wants to lose power.
That's very true.
All right, so we're going to wrap up with a fact. Although we never talked about, well, piece of advice, but we also never talked about how if we combine city and county, our crime statistics go way down, which is a major benefit of consolidation.
Well,
that's true.
There was another thing I read, I'm not exactly sure where, but it was if we take away one neighborhood, and I think somewhere in North City, our crime would go down too. Yeah, probably in Donnybrook, you're right. But like, St. Louis isn't as violent of a city as everyone wants it to be. It's violent, don't get me wrong. There was the 12th child under the age of 18 shot and like gone by gun violence.
Yeah.
And since the beginning of the summer. Like, we're a violent city, but there's way more violent cities than St. Louis. It just doesn't seem like it because the crime statistics don't accurately represent our community.
We also become the 7th biggest city in the nation if we consolidate.
Which would look so good for people to come in. Yeah.
Right, now you got businesses who are like 7th biggest city.
Like, oh,
that'd
interesting.
Nice.
And then our tip of the video is going to be about St. Louis parking. Driver, you want to take it since you had to find the parking?
My tip would just be not to kind of avoid parking meters as taboo, because we were looking at parking lots and odds are it would have cost us more than it did just filling in a meter. Another tip when it comes to parking, if you don't want spare change, just put it in like some consolidated area in your car and just keep it there. Yeah. And just keep it there, so then when in fact you are in need of coins for a meter, although now a lot of times you don't need it, you can just use that spare change, so then it's not like it's money coming out of your bank account or anything like that. But yeah, definitely don't be afraid to use parking spots with meters, because they're probably cheaper than paying to park in an actual lot.
All right, thanks for tuning in.